In 2005, as Hurricane Katrina struck, many New Orleans and Louisiana residents clung to their rooftops in search for help, with words such as "Help us" spray painted on their rooftops. They looked in the air for promised help, but that help was not coming, and most of the time flew over them. Hurricane Katrina was one of the most powerful natural disasters to hit land in the United States. But this natural disaster was not just a natural disaster, it was a humanitarian disaster on every level of failure from the government and resources. Today, I will persuade and explain why and how this happened. To begin with, the negligence and vulnerability of many in New Orleans and flood-prone areas was extreme. The U.S. Census Bureau of 2005 stated that 30% of the New Orleans population lived in poverty and 67% was African American. Many of these population levels lived in flood-prone areas such as the Ninth Ward and Gentilly. But they were promised accessible evacuations at the time when called, but these never came. Some claim it took them 5 days just to get buses to them. Dylan French Cole stated, "We were left like dogs. They just left us here to die. No food, no water. Babies were dehydrating and dying." But this was not all. The failed responses were astronomical. The Superdome was supposed to be a place of refuge for many who could not leave New Orleans, but instead was a place of despair and death. Not only were the toilets overflowing and there was no food or water, but many were dying in their seats. But there was also medical negligence and security negligence through the roofs. There were cases of assault taking place, robberies, and that was not called for at the time in a place that was supposed to protect many. FEMA was also delayed and mismanaged. FEMA called off their searches just 3 days after the storms, some claiming they could not handle this level of disaster. A 2006 congressional report stated this was a failure of initiative on every level of government. Denise Moore, a New Orleans Katrina survivor who was in the Superdome, also stated, "I saw elderly people dying in their wheelchairs. People were screaming and crying for help. It was like living in a horror movie." But the inequality and racial bias was also there. The cracks showed. Studies shown Black people were less likely to get help and more likely to lose their homes. The media was also extremely biased. A 2005 article and many news channels portrayed others just looking for food, while Black people were portrayed as looters and thugs and also shot. A New Orleans survivor stated in the New York Times, "If this had been a rich white neighborhood and it got flooded, you think it would have taken 5 days to send buses?" It took 5 days to send buses to the Ninth Ward, while Lakeview and other rich, well-known neighborhoods were receiving the first help they could receive. But the displacement and trauma was more. Over 1 million residents were displaced from New Orleans in states as far as Utah and Kentucky. Rebuilding excluded many. Many were promised their houses or apartments to be rebuilt, but even today, they look back and just see leveled homes or concrete slabs. Hartman, a New Orleans resident, stated, "They rebuilt our buildings but did not rebuild our lives. The people who built New Orleans what it was were priced out, pushed out, and forgotten." Many were looking to move back into their homes, but prices were gouged and raised by many landlords. In conclusion, Hurricane Katrina was not just a natural disaster, but many faced institutional abandonment. This was not just a Category 5 hurricane, but a Category 5 humanitarian disaster on every level. The negligence and inequality should not have happened, but the cracks showed and were very visible. In the future, let our help in natural disasters be based on humanity and goodwill towards each other and not our bias or hatred towards one another, as this is still happening today in many areas of the world. Let us not be neglectful and leave others, like many were, stranded in 2005 on their rooftops, fearing for the water. But let us help each other based on our humanity and care for one another, like we should have in Katrina. Thank you.